Good evening and welcome to Monday night. We are making a little change here, mostly on account of personal life circumstances that it just makes it a little more convenient for me to do this on Mondays rather than Sundays. Change of times, change of seasons, and that's just an inevitable part of life. Sometimes we come up with rules that are useful for us. We stick by these rules, we keep these rules, those rules keep us, and we're all in good shape there. But there are only some rules that are worth keeping all the time. There are only some, very few rules that can be applied without discrimination, without having to worry about whether or not it's correct. Only some rules can reach that level. Most of the rules that we come up with should be amenable to change, should be updated when the situation calls for it. Um, I think most especially the sort of rules that are easiest to always keep and are always good are things that tell you to stay away from intrinsically evil actions. Something that under no circumstances is ever going to be a good thing. So we're all, Peterson fans here. Stop telling lies, or at least don't say things that you know aren't. That's a type of rule that can always be applied and will always be correct. You shouldn't say things that you know are the opposite of the truth, at least saying them sincerely. The occasional little joke might be okay. You can always apply that rule, always be correct. But that's only a few number of the rules that we can possibly come up with. Most of the rules that we come up with, maybe you apply them in this situation. Maybe you don't apply them in this situation. Maybe a rule will work for a solid 5 years, but the circumstances will change. You'll change. The people around you will change. And you'll find that those rules are no longer as useful as they once were. So you go ahead and you update your map, you update the way that you behave to adjust to the new circumstances. That's a part of life. It's a part of life that we all have to deal with. And it's a part of life that I get to deal with too, because when I first started doing these open mic live streams, Sundays worked really well. But things have changed. The scenarios have changed. My life has changed a little bit, and so applying the rule have your open mics on Sunday nights is no longer working the way that it once did. And so let's give this Monday night a try. We should hold on to a rule, even one that was useful for a while, if it no longer is serving its purpose. As you can see, we've got the StreamYard link here. Got to have a YouTube account or a Google account or some way of verifying in order to get in. But we at this point open it up. If you want to come in here and talk to me about rules, you can. And if you want to come in here and talk to me about something else, you certainly can. But I do appreciate the opportunity to have a little bit of back and forth. And I know I'm upsetting the normal schedule of things, but I can't upset it badly enough to keep Mark away.
That is true, fella. I wouldn't leave you here alone by yourself on a Monday night, uh, struggling with your awesome streams. That's for sure. That's my rule. Don't leave your friends stranded.
Don't leave your friends stranded. That's a good rule right there. You can probably apply that one pretty consistently.
I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna try my best. Yeah, it's interesting that that's sort of your topic. I've been doing a commentary on the Peterson Dawkins video, and I finished part 2 today. I released part 1 today, uh, thanks to my awesome team, who's awesome. I have so much good, volunteer help. It's really a blessing. Um, yeah, that kind of came up, right? They did the lowercase t truth versus capital T truth thing, and I'm like, This is the most tired trope I've ever heard in my life. People need to stop with the different types of truth thing. It's so annoying. Like,
Metaphorical truth versus literal truth, right?
well, they did that one too. I think that's in part two, at least of my commentary. I don't know if I'm going to get it done in 3 parts or 4. Probably 4, but there's some hope for 3. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. 'Cause I'm watching it for the first time when I do the commentary and everything. It's a true reaction video. So yeah, it's interesting to watch them struggle with simple concepts for no reason. Like, let's just make this complicated when it's really easy. And then we can argue about the complication we've introduced. And I'm like, or you could not introduce the complication? I don't know. It's it's or it's several orders of magnitude less work, but hey, you do you.
I mean, the nice thing about being Catholic is you can just tell people that there's one author of all truth, and he can't
Right.
contradict himself because he's a really good author. So it's like you might not be able to put these things together right now, but someday um, you might be able to. All right. So Andrew's got a question here. So, like, if we're not in communion, can I still do confession with a Catholic priest? He's from California.
I love it.
So I happen to know that he was attending an Ethiopian church there, and with let's say those churches that have valid apostolic succession, which his would include. It also would include the I think the Orthodox churches and not Ethiopian, Coptic. Totally different. Totally
Close
different.
enough. Close. It's all the same. They're all
And
over there.
they're all over there. Well, that's close enough. Yeah. Coptic church. It still applies. If a member of these churches approaches a Catholic minister uh, on their own accord, spontaneously, and asks for the sacraments of communion, confession, or anointing of the sick, they can freely be given to them so long as they're properly disposed to receive those sacraments, which is not something that we would extend to the Protestant churches. Uh, there's a higher regard for the apostolic succession, the continuity of the liturgical traditions, the fact that we would believe, at least on our part, that we're celebrating the same Eucharist in a way that the Eucharist in Protestant churches would not be the same. So, answer is yes, but I'm not allowed to tell you that kind of unless you're asking. So it's a good thing you asked because now I can tell you. But you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to be like, "Hey, we could do this, buddy. Why don't you just go ahead and hop in the confessional?" It's got to be a spontaneous choice on the part of the person in one of those churches. So
Oh, I didn't realize it. You don't give confession to just anyone, huh?
I mean, people can tell me whatever they want in a private conversation.
Sure,
And
sure.
if they think they're going to confession or it kind of looks like confession, then the seal of confession would still apply. Um, so if
Mm.
it kind of looks like the seal of confession goes for more than just sacramental confession. It goes for things that aren't quite sacramental confession, but somebody might be confused that it is and begin to tell you things. So the seal of confession would extend to that.
So how does that play into, because for me it's like, well, confession's great, but you need, and I can understand why you wouldn't want uh, the Protestant pagan heresies not to participate. But like like what for me it's like confession's insufficient, right? You still need the repentance part. And so how does that play into, let's say, a non confessional uh confession, right? A
Well,
non
so it's different, right? So
Mhm.
that's somebody telling me things. It's not sacramental confession.
Right.
So, you know, it's not as good. Basically, I can't give you absolution at the end of that if you're doing a non-sacramental confession, even if it is still covered by the seal of confession. So,
I see.
So it's mostly a matter of you talking to a candidate, and we like to create hypotheticals for things that really happen because it's fun. So yeah, it doesn't really work, and I'd prefer to just have everybody become Catholic. So
But what if
get a
they
continuing
ask
confession.
what they can do in something like maybe they don't use the word repentance, right? But what if they ask like, "Oh, I did this horrible thing and I'm confessing to you, outside the confessional. What do I do about that?"
I tell them to, if it won't make things worse, apologize and try and make amends.
Mm, mm. Yeah. I mean, I think that whole formulation is actually fantastically important and not talked about enough. And maybe not even, we'll say, close enough to perfect it in the Catholic Church. If I'm being as careful as I can be.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I think like that is the process by which we uh overcome our sin, right? But it has to involve confession and repentance.
Yeah,
Right, and I can't rule out public confession, even though I think the private confession is an innovation to some extent, if such things are, we'll say, allowable. And of course, the orthos would say, "No, no innovation. We reject all innovation." But
yeah,
um,
yeah. I mean, what about like a private sin? And I know no sin is ever truly private because it makes you weaker, and other people have to deal with you in your weakened state. But there might be good reasons for, hey, this whole thing is still pretty well on the down low, and it might actually make things worse if we go and start confessing it publicly. Standing up in front of the church and declaring those sins. It might actually
mm,
make things worse. It could because
yeah,
maybe
well, that's why I
let's
don't
let's
like the public. Yeah, I don't like the public confession for that reason. I think it's
yeah.
extremely dangerous. Actually, I don't. I'm a no, a hard no on that whole thing
Yeah,
for
yeah,
exactly that reason. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there might be a time and place for it, but you got to be real careful about it, and you should probably consult somebody wise before you go into that.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think that's whopping importance. Like, just can't be overstated. This whole idea of, confession and repentance, both at the same in the same breath or something, if you will. It just, I think that's the thing that really makes the big difference.
Sure, I guess the way that plays out in the sacrament of confession is if I don't think that the person who's telling me their sins is actually sorry, I shouldn't
Right.
give them absolution.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, but I mean, even yeah, for me, even beyond absolution, like the absolution's important, but the repentance is more important. It's because what you need them both. I mean, one without the other is better than neither, but also, it's like, right? Because it's your action in the world that changes the world. Like that's the
right.
it's really sort of my point is still there's still materiality. We don't just ignore it. We don't say everything will be fine because God will just make it fine later. Like, no, no thanks.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean,
You got to do something.
if possible, and if it's applicable, depending on the confession, we're supposed to encourage the people and maybe even rather sternly that they need to make amends for whatever it was they did. If they've taken something to restore that, to apologize to people they may have hurt, that sort of thing. So, uh, but that's not something I can secure inside the confessional. So it's sort of like, here's what you should do. One decade of the rosary. Good luck.
Right.
I can only do so much from inside the box.
No, well, and that's fine. Like to me, it's like, well, that's whatever. You can do what you can do, and that's always enough because you have the authority to make it enough. right, but the person has to do something,
Mhm.
right? And I think we get confused, uh, you know, the in the age of gnosis because of the materialism with, "Well, I have to do something that directly addresses the wrong and try to right it," and it's like, that's usually a mistake, actually. I mean, there's certainly circumstances where that is possible, and you should do that. But I think most circumstances, like most things, you're just gonna make it worse. It's like, because that's usually what the way things go in the world.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, sometimes it's like somebody apologizes, and you've forgotten that anything happened. You ever had that happen
mhm.
to you?
Oh
And
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
and it's like, okay, well, I'm glad this person's apologizing, and I accept it because, but like, I don't really remember it, or it didn't, it didn't really hurt me that badly, and it's good for you to try and make amends, but I'm not going to. Um,
I don't feel transgressed. Yeah.
yeah, I don't feel transgressed, but okay. Hey, I'm not going to get in the way of this. This seems like it's coming from a good place there. Are you talking about penance, Mark? Penance could be a part of that. I assigned a little penance for everybody. Uh,
Tell us more about penance, Father. I like this idea.
yeah, sure. So the traditional works of satisfaction for sins are prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. I have um, used all of those all in the confessional as penances, although the almsgiving is rather rare. Um, but it really worked in that scenario and helped the person out a lot. So that was a good thing.
Hmm.
I'm glad I came up with that actually because I was kind of like, and the Holy Spirit came through. Praise God.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so the traditional works of satisfaction, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. These are mentioned by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. So he doesn't mention them as that, but that's kind of the words we've done it, and they directly affect kind of the most valuable things to us, right? So almsgiving, that's your possessions, and if you can separate yourself from those. Especially if whatever pattern of sin we're dealing with has some sort of attachment into it, uh, that can um, that can help. Uh, you got to be careful with that one because then people might say, "Well, gosh, how much does adultery cost, Father?" So that's why we no longer give indulgences for almsgiving,
Mhm.
because see the Protestant Reformation that ended up not very good. Um, the
Oh, so
fasting,
the
is
Protestants were successful in their quest, and they should stop rebelling. Oh, interesting.
that's that sounds good to me. I don't know, but I can't make anybody do anything, so I can barely make myself do anything.
True, true. Sorry, Father, please continue.
Yeah, the fasting. If you've got a pattern of sin that's um, attached
Mm,
to disordered appetites, your appetites are getting the best of you, then doing a little bit of intentional work to separate yourself from your appetites is helpful. And prayer is always safe because you're just making a offering of time and attention to God. And as far as I'm concerned, that never really can go wrong. So, yeah, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are what we give as suitable penances. But the thing is that all these penances are arbitrary. You can't actually earn your salvation. This is just kind of a token of your participation in the saving grace of Christ, but it doesn't actually cause your salvation. It's just kind of supposed to help it along a little bit.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
It seems more than reasonable.
yeah, yeah. That's what we're going for. Yeah, it's in the New Testament, Don. Jesus himself says it. Maybe it's in the Old Testament too, but yeah, it says to make peace with your opponent. on the way to court, and then bring your offering before the Lord. That's if the dispute has gotten to the point where you can still do something about it. And we've got Andrew. I haven't seen Andrew in forever. Happy Monday,
Yeah.
everybody. Um, hope his architecture school's going well. Or maybe he's on to actually building buildings now. That'd be exciting.
You mean cathedrals? Beautiful cathedrals
Big,
populating the world.
big, beautiful cathedrals. We're gonna have the greatest cathedrals. They're gonna be they're gonna be
Yes.
magnificent, tremendous, tremendous cathedrals. We're gonna have all the best architects
You've never
building
seen
them.
cathedrals this good. Yeah.
We're gonna build a cathedral to the moon.
Yeah, because Elon will insist. No doubt. Hadn't
Oh
thought
my
of that.
goodness. Yeah. Yep, yep. Threes are good. I do a lot of fives, and sometimes, and if I ever, if I'm doing confession, if I'm going to give somebody, we'll say, a non-standard penance, I'm always like, hey, you think you could do that? And a lot of times people are like, yeah, I can do it, Father. Sometimes I'll give a cold shower for a penance. It's like that's a little unusual. You're gonna have to remember to do that later. You can't just take care of it at the church. I'll always be like, hey, you think you can manage that? Because if it's a problem, I'll assign you another penance. But I don't assign that one very often. Only when I'm talking to somebody that I rather suspect would appreciate a cold shower, and that's not everybody. The RCIA process, yeah. So it depends on what country you're in. I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world. So the RCIA book, actually, it'll be turning into the OCIA here pretty soon. The OCIA book gives kind of a general like outline and some rituals that you should be doing along the way, but leaves a lot of flexibility for the timing and how exactly things work. So OCIA stands for Order of Christian Initiation for Adults, and it's for the most part targeted at bringing people in who are not yet baptized. So all of the book envisions, you know, people coming from nothing into the church. We often use the same process for people who are becoming Catholic in the United States, but are already baptized in another tradition because, this being kind of like a mostly Christian culture, there's a lot of things that we can just figure that people already might have known from their Lutheran, Baptist, Methodist church. Enough in common that we don't have to start exactly from the beginning a lot of times. Although, there's a growing number of people my age and younger that never got baptized and never went to church at all. Um, so you got to be careful with it. And kind of comes in stages. Is there's like a pre-evangelization stage. Uh, Gosh, I used to know all this a lot better. And then the inquiry, the catechumenate or candidacy, rites of purification, and then full reception into the church. The way this works in the United States usually is you show up and there's a kind of a series of classes with a cohort of people who are all coming in at the same time, and the classes, the quality of it depends on what parish you're at. If you're in a very small parish, you might get one-on-one instruction with the priest because you're the only one coming in that year, and you get that. Um, so yeah, a lot of these classes will begin in September and conclude in May, and you would become Catholic at the Easter Vigil. Um, that's kind of the most common part there. So yeah, I don't know what you don't know about OCIA, so you go ahead and fill me in with anything that you want to know. And Andrew's coming in here. He's living in Korea. It's pretty different than America, and that doesn't surprise me at all because of how um, flexible the way thing is written. And the Korean folk might just do things differently in Korea. So just
They'd have to for cultural context, as you mentioned. Yeah.
yeah. Why do my Catholic priests seem unavailable? If I'm remembering, he's in Michigan, and depending on what diocese you are in Michigan, they might be quite incredibly short on priests. I know the Diocese of Saginaw is really hurting for priests. The Diocese of Kalamazoo as well is a little bit short, but a little easier to find them in Lansing, Grand Rapids, and Detroit. And then there's nobody at Marquette, so the priests should be bored there. That's the Upper Peninsula. Uh, it's about as populated as North Dakota is. And depends on what you want to converse with them. Uh, you know, if you're looking for like going in depth on something that you want advice on, confession isn't necessarily appropriate. You could just say, "Hey, Father, I've got something I want to talk about. Could we make an appointment?" And you might have to go through the whole rigmarole of making an appointment there. And I do it all the time when I can. And there are some people that I meet with regularly. Um, yeah, yeah. So confession is usually not good for that because we're very, intent on the business that we're there, which is confessing your sins, saying you're sorry. I usually don't go more than about a minute of advice. Oftentimes I'm done in like 30 seconds. And then we do active contrition and absolution there. So, so yeah, I would recommend just if you've got something you really want to get off your chest, make an appointment and respect the priest's time. So, yeah, the handshake line after mass, and yeah, yeah, you've got lots of people calling for your attention at that time. So, so if you really want to dive into things, you can certainly do it. And this priest right now is available to talk, and we've got our little StreamYard link right here, so you can just come in. I do believe I have it pinned, so you certainly could come in and talk to this priest who's making himself available. So yeah,
It looks pinned to me, Father. It looks good.
I've got it on my other monitor, my little hacker setup here, multiple monitors.
Whoa! Look
Yeah.
at you. Fancy.
I don't know how, like, there are people who still just go with one monitor. I don't know how they do it, right? Like,
I don't either. I got no idea. I don't even know what that means. One monitor. Like, what are you talking about? I've never heard of
so
such thing.
a laptop,
I have a
and then
laptop.
like, let's imagine you didn't bring a portable monitor along with you. You've only got to use that one screen.
What? I don't even know what you're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah. Well, yes, yes. I know you've got a very fancy
What do you mean,
that.
portable monitor? What do you mean, What do you mean, I don't understand what you're saying. I basically take my desktop setup with me at a slightly lower resolution, which works for
High
the
frame rate
outside office.
problem. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, a
because now
single
I've got the
monitor might.
outside. Yeah, I've got an outside office now, so I've got a. I need to get the blinds set up, but once the blinds are up, then I'll be able to use all. Because now it's cold, but it'll warm up someday, and then yeah, I've got the outdoor blinds so that I can block the sun. But yeah, I've got a
But
desk outside and a little battery pack and everything. It's crazy. It's so awesome. Yeah, when
yeah,
you come visit again, you'll see all the work that's been done, and the place is completely different now. And it's just yeah, things have come along quite nicely. It's nice to have
nothing
an
like
outdoor
the.
office.
Yeah, yeah. No, sure would be nice. It's getting chilly here, so uh,
Come on down.
yeah, yeah. I got a lot of traveling this year, and it's all next year, 2025, and it's all like backloaded after I get back from Washington D.C.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm gonna go to Italy for the Jubilee year.
really?
Yeah, with our diocesan trip. So
That's great.
yeah, oh yeah, the Jubilee. I mean, the holy doors only get opened every so often. so you got to take the advantage to walk through the holy doors when they're open, because they'll be shut and you can't walk through them.
What's the significance? What are these doors? Tell us all.
Holy doors. Yeah. Oh, the holy door. Yeah, you're asking. So, you go back to the Bible and you read some of the stuff. Gosh, I think it's in. I don't remember if it's in Leviticus or Deuteronomy, but it's in one of those books. This idea of every 50 years they would have a jubilee. The debts
Mhm.
get canceled out. Um,
Right.
People return the land that they had. It's sort of like basically we're just going to set everything back to zero there,
Mhm.
and we're going to start again.
Right.
So in 1300, uh, the Pope decided that he was going to start doing jubilees himself, and so he created the holy doors at the four major basilicas in Rome, and pilgrims who uh, passed through those doors a certain number of times and did the ordinary things like confession and receiving Holy Communion would have a plenary indulgence available to them. And back in those
Oh.
days, it was harder to get a plenary indulgence. It's super easy now. I actually think that's a good thing because the fine print on the plenary indulgences still applies. You have to be free of all attachment to sin before you get entirely out of purgatory.
Mhm.
Otherwise, your indulgence works to the degree that you're detached from sin. So, yeah, we're talking about indulgence again tonight. Classic, classic open mic, more indulgences. So the original plan was is that they were going to do these jubilees every 100 years, and then the next guy was like, we're going to do them every 50. So
Mm.
1300, then 1350. And then sometime I think in the 15th century, they're like, we're going to do these every 25 years. And 25 seems to be a good
Mm.
rhythm, right? It's like you don't just have the one chance to go to one, maybe you can go to Rome a little bit later.
Mm.
Uh, there's also extraordinary jubilees where the Pope could just decide we're going to do this again. So the last extraordinary jubilee was in 2015. Did not have an opportunity to go to Rome in that one. We are almost certain to have another jubilee in 2033 because that'll be 2,000 years of redemption. Uh, yeah, and in addition to the indulgences are great. Big fan of indulgences. Go catch them all. As far as I'm concerned, um, got to catch them all. Uh,
I witnessed that. Yes.
yeah,
Like, what are you doing?
venerating a relic.
I was like, what is happening?
You just go
What did
venerate
I
a
get
relic.
involved in?
Well, I mean that was in a chapel that had all of Repnick's art in it, so that would be unsettling.
It was unsettling, but it was just funny to watch you play Pokemon for Catholics. It was like Catholic Pokemon. Who
I
knew?
was venerating for the folks who weren't there. I was venerating a relic of Saint John Paul II, and there was an indulgence attached to it. So I got the indulgence as well. Because I had gone to confession recently and had received communion that very day. Where was I? Yeah. Yeah. So I think the jubilees are also a good opportunity. It's like a New Year's resolution, but like for the whole church on a slower time
Mm.
scale to like take stock, see what we're doing, see what was working, ask God for fresh outpouring of grace, all of those things. So that's what the jubilees are all about. So anyway, holy doors are going to be open in 2025, and Rome is just going to be a madhouse because I'm not the only one who thinks, oh, I've got to go to Rome and check out the holy doors. However, if you can't get to Rome, your diocesan bishop should be designating pilgrimage sites within your own diocese that you can go and get plenary indulgences, and you can celebrate the jubilees everywhere that there are Catholics. So we have, I think, 6 places in our diocese. Means there's no excuse for not getting those indulgences.
Can I get all my debts removed somehow? Is that a thing?
Your deaths.
Yeah, Jubilees, you're supposed to wipe out all the debts. So I'll take my house back, please. That'd be great.
Well, unfortunately, Unfortunately, the church lost the battle against usury. So
Well, it wouldn't
we,
apply anyway. I mean, that's how the Jews became bankers in Europe, and now we have Protestants. They don't follow any rules anyway, or at least they follow selective rules when they feel like it or something. So, yeah.
ah, I knew this was going to come up. Can I get some good Luce merch? I've got the goods. I do not have any Luce merch. Total unforced error on the Vatican's part. They could have avoided all of this extremely simply. They could have said, "Hey, here's the Jubilee mascot for kids." They just said, we made this for the kids. The kids are going to love it, you know." And yeah, yeah, they could have just done that. It would have been, oh, it's for kids, okay. Because the kids will like it, you know. But they basically just seem to heavily imply that it's like, ah, we're also doing this for the weebs, you know. And I think this just tells you that weebs are overgrown children.
Yeah.
Uh, yep, yep. All right. Cal comes in. Serious question. How would money be loaned without usury? I don't know. Like, I look at this whole thing. I look at like the the war that the church was raising against usury for centuries. That it just kind of dropped in the 18th century, and I don't know how to deal with it or how to fix it.
Well, you can loan money without charging interest. That's all it is. Like, there's no problem with that.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not a problem when the quote speed of money, which is a real concept that you actually should understand,
Hmm.
is low enough, then it doesn't matter. But when the speed of money is much higher, that can start to make a difference, especially if the loans are longer term.
Yeah. Gerald Murphy here doesn't likes Luce except for the blue hair. Yeah, the unnatural hair colors, man. I could tolerate it on teenagers who are doing it for just a little bit of rebellion, because just a little bit of rebellion is almost inevitable, and maybe even a bit healthy. So I have even seen like homeschooled kids with the yeah. Who came up with Luce? I believe that was the dicastery for evangelization, if I remember correctly. Might also have been another Vatican dicastery. So uh, Al wants to know about the speed of money. Um,
Basically, the easiest way to understand the speed of money is called inflation, right? And so, if inflation is zero, you can loan money at 0%, and you don't lose any money by loaning it effectively. There's a lot more to it than that, but the easiest way for most people to understand it is the other term for it is called the time value of money, right? Where money starts to have a value based on time, and that it's not that that's invalid or shouldn't be a thing, but also it sort of indicates that there's a problem because this evil thing, and it is evil, called economics, starts to become a thing in the world. And you shouldn't have a world with economics, and that's why almost all economists are frauds, according to Nassim Taleb, who is 1,000,000,000% correct about that. So yeah, but basically inflation, like when money takes on a quality all its own, irrespective of all other factors. In other words, it's unmoored from, it's unmoored in more than one way, we'll say, because money, see navigating patterns, you want to understand money. If money is just, unmoored in one particular specific way, which is the way it operates, it's not a problem. But when it becomes unmoored in other ways and then develops its own way of multiplying by itself, independent of all these other factors, then it becomes a factor in the world that doesn't we don't require it. We don't require that factor.
yeah, because this is the edge of my knowledge here, so I might not be quite correct, but Aristotle's argument against usury was that it was an unnatural use of money, that
Yeah.
money shouldn't just be used to make more money. You know,
Yep.
he understood it as a medium of exchange that could be helpful, but like if you're using it just to make more money, that's a problem. So
Yeah, right. Well, then it becomes self-referential. Right. That's why, yeah, having a value independent of other things makes it referencing itself, and that becomes a problem.
yeah,
And I get what Andrew's saying, but original usury was no interest. That's because, and it was a moral issue. It had nothing to do with there were this legal thing, man. Legal's real recent, guys. I hate to break it to you. And legal, like, laws were so non-existent in the past that, except for, we'll say, biblical laws, sort of along the lines of the 10 commandments, although a little bit more than that, they changed every king for real. And they changed more frequently, actually, because usually the king was kind of like, whatever, just don't do these 5 things, and plus all the biblical things. And then your local lord had a bunch of laws, and that may change. Like, the local lord every year could make new laws, and that happened all the time. Not everywhere, not universally, but like that was pretty common. So this idea of like a stable legal system over time supported by the governing system, that's actually really recent in history.
it was probably like the Gregorian reforms and the rediscovery of the Justinian Code and the development of the science of canon law that's like the first proper legal system in the world that continuously operates until now,
Oh, that's probably true. Yeah,
right?
that level
Because
of
like you
history,
do,
we need Adam here for that stuff. He might know off the top of his head where the first like long-term legal system actually
I'm pretty sure
happened.
it's the Catholic Church, right? I mean, the Roman Empire too, right? The Roman Empire had many. Uh, they had jurists, man. They had proper jurists.
Rome, yes. The
The whole
empire, I actually
okay,
don't
yeah.
think so. That's the problem, is that, yeah, the governance of an individual city or duchy, if you want to go with the later term, was not like it just nothing works the way it works now. Nothing. Like everything was different in ways you actually can't imagine. You start studying history and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Absolutely, it does not, because all
Mhm.
the rules you take for granted in civilized society post World War II in particular, um, none of that stuff it just didn't happen, right? And a lot of stuff, like we've no appreciation still to this day how much the U.S. and the way a large federal, because we have the first real federal system. Before that, there's no government that big. Because I don't even think Rome's republic operated on the scale in the way that the federal U.S. government operates at all. It's
Mhm.
totally different, even though they're both republics. It's totally right. We're modeled on the Roman model, but like the Roman provinces had very, very different governance structures, to the
Yeah,
point
yeah.
where governors in Roman provinces were overthrown locally all the time. And occasionally Rome would be like, hey, we're just going to send out the legions and remove this guy. Like, it happened both
Mhm,
ways. We don't even have that now. Like,
mhm,
so like
mhm.
we don't have a sense for what that looks like. Although it
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of happens in the US, but not to that degree, because everything gets mediated through the governance system here, and that does not happen in the past. This is a very recent development where people could vote people in and out of office. That never happened before. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah, no, I really think. I mean, I really think the development of the science of canon law is like kind of the groundwork for the modern legal systems that we have, especially on the continent in Europe, because they were more closely tied to the Roman law, and the Italian way of doing things. Whereas in England, their entire legal system grew up separate from the universities. That actually makes a big difference in the way you practice canon law, because you can just take a respected jurist and use their opinions in a sentence and it has juridic weight, right?
Right.
Somebody who
Yeah.
just teaches at a university and doesn't judge cases. Whereas the common law system is like, no. You wanna talk to the people who've been judging cases because that's where the authority came from. It all grew up outside of the university system there. So yeah, yeah. I mean, the first 1,000 years of Christianity in the West, it's all canon law. They wouldn't have called it canon law for starters. They would have just said, church governance or how to be a bishop, or I don't even know what
No,
the
no, it's
term they would use.
no, it's the Inquisition technically.
But the Inquisition came later. That's a medieval thing. I'm talking like the
Right, but
first.
right, but it was the like you didn't a lot of people would blaspheme deliberately against the church because they could then be tried by the Inquisition instead of their local authorities, and
Right.
and
That's
that
like
was
16th
usually a
century
good thing.
Spain. That's like 16th century Spain. I'm talking about the first millennia of Christianity.
Yeah,
Right.
well, it was
So
before 16th century Spain, but yeah,
yeah.
the Inquisition was before that even. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, but you can see this clear progression or emergence of a universal system. Will say that spans governmental structures.
Yeah. 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 So I think it was kind of the rediscovery of these legal texts and putting them into a university context that got things kind of cooking there with the development of laws and that sort of thing. But no, the earliest Inquisition, I think, would have been in France to combat the Albigensian heresy. Although there were still, I mean, bishops were still holding trials and examining doctrine and condemning heretics. Before that, it just the Inquisition structure of like a stable body of people who were doing this is a medieval innovation
Right.
rather
Yeah,
than just dealing
innovation.
with problems as they come up, which is how it seems as far as I can tell. I have taken my history of canon law class. So
Good,
anyway,
good.
the way it usually works is you do whatever the boss says. So, and if you don't like it, you can appeal to the big boss and see if he can override that.
I don't like Andrew's advice to buy Bitcoin. It's at like 87,000 or something stupid, and it's very likely to go down. So good luck.
What was it? Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look. We have
Bitcoin took
the instant.
off, took off when the election results came in. Yeah. The guys, I do a call on Fridays, a lot of days, a lot of Fridays, and
Man,
those
actually,
guys are all Bitcoin crazies. So all of their predictions have been wrong so far, by the way, but that's
holy
okay.
mackerel! Yeah, 88,000.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Eighty-eight
Yeah.
thousand right now. Now's the time to sell, people. Don't buy. Sell the
Don't
Bitcoin.
buy.
Gosh, I might.
It's not gonna keep going up. It's not. I mean, in the very short term, it might, but I don't know. 3 months, 1 month, 1 day. Who knows?
I mean, we were talking about money, unmoored for everything from everything else, and that's Bitcoin right there. It's like it's unmoored even from the government's, monopoly money. Like that's
Right,
pretty
right.
far
But
removed.
it's still tied to the same value prop, which means when the dollar goes down, it goes down. And when the dollar is strong, it's strong. And that's why it's going up. And nobody likes that answer because they want to believe they have a money system apart from all other money systems that actually make sense. And then they can't define what makes sense means, and they can't define value, and they can't, right? It's all the things they can't define. And then it just tracks the dollar pretty well. I mean, not exactly, but actually, all the dips track and all the highs track. So I don't, do you have something separate from the dollar if it follows the dollar? I don't know. I don't think so.
The dollar by any other name.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It looks like Cal says, even if there's no inflation, I still don't understand how you incentivize people to get loans. You don't. Why? Loans are bad. Loans are bad for everybody. How's that? Solved. Look at that.
There is something, and this is a part of the Summa that I don't understand all that well, where if the loan is for something that let's say you don't pay it back, the person, like there's proper collateral that's like roughly equal to the amount that the loan is for, then that's a little more okay as long as the interest rates aren't so bad. But if
Right.
it's like a personally guaranteed loan, student loans,
Right.
that's straight up usurious. Yeah, this is Cal points out that loans are kind of how we built our civilization, and that's why I don't like poking at this because it's like
Yeah. They
I don't have the I don't have the the alternative. So
they're not though. They're not. Like we built our civilization entirely without money. And that's what people don't understand. Everybody thinks money drives things, and it actually doesn't. Money tracks things. And in fact, money only tracks things in the past. And I think Ixnay, who looks like an excellent, well-schooled scholar of navigating patterns, at least in terms of money theory, future potential value should not be used for more than increasing future potential value, right? So money is supposed to represent something in the past and therefore indicate its future value or your future value for that work that you did. And so it's a measure, it's a tracking of work, roughly speaking. And that work can be translated into storable value, right? So one example of this is mining. If I mine gold, it's like my work has turned into value. You have to mine it. Like everybody misses this because they look at money in the middle and they don't realize, no. All good money transactions, not all transactions, because I get the money system's corrupt and economics is a corruption of money for real. But all good money systems actually track to work directly. And you can argue, well, but digging for gold is bad because, yeah, but gold has value because people seek gold, right? And they transport that gold. Like, there's a long history of the reason why you have a crown of gold is so that you can melt it down and start a war. That's actually a thing, right? It's a transportable means of wealth. And so you're taking your family's work through time. When you have a lot of it, you store it in the gold. And then when you have less of it because you become sick, you chip off some of the gold and give it away. And right. And so it smooths things out. Right. But actually, sort of the history of loans is, yeah, most people loan their work and sometimes they get paid. And if you actually look at how people get wealthy, most people get wealthy by volunteering, roughly speaking. So if you want to make a lot of money in a business, like you want to start a business, what you do is you do this thing. They call it sweat equity. What does that mean? That means you work for free, dumbass. You put in all this work and you roll the dice with that work. And if it doesn't work out, you put in all that work for nothing. That's exactly what happens in when you're building a business. That's exactly
because
what happens.
people who get wealthy, something that's very common among them, right? So we're not saying inheriting wealth. We're saying being able to build something. A necessary but not sufficient condition is being able to tolerate high levels of risk.
That's right. It's all risk. Right. Yeah. Read Nassim Taleb. You'll start to understand risk better. But humans make decisions based on risk. And if you take a lot of risk with, say, work you've stored up, in other words, I have $10,000. I'm going to live off that while I build an application that's going to change the world. And people do this. People are doing this right now. I think there's probably 1,000 people in the world right now in the process of this. I know a bunch of them, by the way. It's not 1,000, but I know like 3 or 4, right? They've taken their life savings that they've saved from actually working other jobs, and they're dumping it into either paying somebody or paying themselves to build an app. And whether or not that app changes the world is a different story, but they're taking a huge risk because it takes a lot of time to build the momentum to build something and then put it out into the world. And at each stage of building, you have to change, right? And then make the change from having a product to having to market the product, for example, right? And then having to sell the product, because those are 2 separate things. Oh yeah, it gets really complicated. And then
You got to keep the customers happy.
right. Well, and then maybe you make enough to keep going.
Yeah.
It's,
So
that's
that's a
usually how it
high
happens.
risk proposition right there.
And then if you keep going long enough, you get all kinds of options. Like once you've run a business long enough and you have a little bit of money coming in, and usually a very little, like most entrepreneurs, like they'll be running a business for 3 years and they'll make less than they would make working in the private sector. And they will have sunk $100,000 or $200,000 in, maybe more already. Like that's very common. That's like the most common case. And then maybe they can build more momentum by getting the right um, loan at the right time or something, or the right investment at the right time. And then maybe they hit it big. But almost none of them do, right? It used to be 1 in 10, right? So a venture capital firm would invest in 10 firms knowing they're going to lose on 9 of them. It's
But
nutty
they
business model.
get outrageous returns on the one that does really well.
Yeah, they
So
get
the
a
math,
they're looking for 1 10xer is the general
yeah.
rule of it, but usually they get a 100xer, right? Because that's how that works. You build that momentum, and if that momentum catches, it's a snowball effect, and boom, you don't get a linear progression. You get a nonlinear progression. It goes parabolic, and that's what they look for. But they know you can't do that on a single spread bet, so you spread your bet amongst 10 candidates, and you give them the best chance that you can.
And so it's
That's how
that
it's always
venture
been.
capitalists, that capitalism, this idea that there are banks that will take the risk for you, right? They've amassed all this wealth and they'll take the risk for you. I think that's maybe kind of the thinking that's coming behind this statement, that loans are kind of how we built our civilization. Because when you've got
Hmm.
more people taking these risks, and it's a little more, corporatized, and it's not just all being on like one crazy person who's gonna do this. It there's affordances there.
Right. Well, for sure. But I guess I would argue this. So when you hear people talk about consumerism and late stage capitalism, you build that with loans. That's what you
Hmm.
build with loans. It's maybe not the only thing you build with loans, but that's what you build with loans.
Hmm.
Right. And that's actually what they're complaining about. They don't understand that. I get that. Also, they're a little on the slow side and don't have a good grasp of what money is. You can just talk to them. You ask them, "Oh, what do you think money is?" And they'll go, "Oh, Bitcoin." I'm like, no, 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 that's not what money is. Those are representations of what money is. Those aren't what money is. It's a different question. And they, look, fair enough if you don't know the difference. I get it. But if they don't know the difference, then they also cannot possibly know what they're talking about. So that's a good way to know right away. Do you actually know what you're talking about? Because you ask that deeper question and they don't understand the question. Fair. Most of us don't. Almost no one does. Fair. Also, I should listen to you about that thing because you don't know anything about it. I went over this on my personal channel, which is just my name, where I was
Oh,
talking about, yeah, you want to interview somebody and for a computer job, and you ask them for specific types of computer jobs, granted, but like I was talking about an algorithm job, and you ask them, do you prefer Tenenbaum or Sedgwick? And if they don't know who either of those people are, then you don't hire them for the algorithm job ever, under any circumstance. It's not that hard. Like, it's not, everyone asks like this is really hard. No, it's actually not that hard to determine how deep someone's knowledge is in a topic. Now that requires you to have that deep knowledge, or you to get advice from somebody with that deep knowledge. But like, it's actually not that hard. It's really easy.
yeah. I mean, if I ever needed to figure out if somebody was really a priest, I'd ask them what seminary they went to, the name of their bishop, and to tell me the formula of absolution.
I don't know
Any
any of
priest.
those things.
Yeah, right. Any priest would just be able to be like, "Oh yeah, I went to here to seminary. Bishop so and so is my bishop," and then can rattle off the formula of absolution, no problem, because you've done it. If you've been a priest for 3 months, you've done it over 100 times.
Mm.
So, so yeah, that's yeah. There's ways to tell. There's ways to tell. Real quick ways to tell things that this guild should know and that nobody else would know. I'm interested in this sweat equity thing. This is the first I've ever heard of it. That
Oh.
people are able to do that. Is it like
Mm.
a strategy for building useful relationships with people?
No, actually, it's really just the expression of, do you work or do you just want money?
No, okay.
Right? So it's a signal like, are you willing to work for free for the potential of me investing in your company? Right? In other words, I'm willing to invest in your company and you think that, your idea is worth, okay, let me explain something very important. Zero ideas are worth any money at all, even a penny. Sorry. Every idea you could possibly have, 100,000 people have already had long before you ever thought of them. This is something that VCs will tell you over and over again. There's zero business ideas that you have that are unique. Zero. Absolutely none. And that's almost universally true. And so what they want to know is, are you a worker? Are you a hard worker? And can you work with others? And so what VC teams typically look at is, what is the team like? Right? That's what they care about. Can you build a good team? If your team takes a hit, if you lose your marketing guy, can you get a new one who can work with you guys? Right? Things like that. That's what they care about, the relationships. But the way they do the value prop is they say, look, because typically VCs, I don't know what they're doing nowadays because the market's really crazy. The whole VC thing, it's really nuts right now.
Everything's
But
crazy. You don't need to say it.
in the past, what they used to do is, and people would get really upset. They'd be like, look, we're going to take like 75% of your company. And people would be like, that's outrageous and so unfair. And it's like, no, you don't understand. Like, they're taking a risk. They need a big return. Like, there's just no way around it. Now, I know they don't take 75 anymore generally because there's too much competition. But they still take large chunks. And the reason why they do that is basically they say, look, if not for the money, you wouldn't have a company, which is technically true, right? Someone's going to put up the dollars. Now it's much cheaper, by the way. It didn't used to be this cheap. But in the old days, it would cost you $4 or $5 grand to start like a corporation. Even an LLC was, horrifically expensive. Nowadays, it's like $70 and 20 minutes of your time on the internet. But in the day, it wasn't like that. But they would be like, it literally takes money to start your company. And therefore, if you don't have any money or you're not willing to put up the money, which is usually the case, then, where's your equity? Oh, my equity is in my work. Oh, okay. So we're going to value your work at a certain equity level. And then what most VCs would do is they say, look, we're going to own 80% of your company until you've put in like 6,000 hours. And then you're going to own another 20% of that. And we'll only own 60% of your company. Formulas like that is what they used to do. They don't do that anymore, like I said, or they don't do that in that way anymore. So that was their way of measuring how much of their company they owned and how much you should own. And they gave you a basis for doing that. And
It's
that's why I say
almost
it's not loans, right? It's not loans
yeah.
that built civilization. It's the willingness to take the risk that built civilization. And it's the over leveraging of that risk through financial instruments that causes, quote, late stage capitalism or consumerism, although those are two different things, right? But they're both
They
the
feed into
result
each
of
other,
over
certainly.
leveraging through over leveraging risk through purely financial means. In other words, using money and money and derivatives of money to do that, whether it be stocks or bonds or notes or whatever,
Or Bitcoin.
or Bitcoin, or oh man, the Bitcoin's crazy right now because there's
Yeah.
mining businesses going under, and I'm like, I don't even understand how Bitcoin mining makes other people money. That's a very strange concept to me, but that's where all the money is right now in Bitcoin, by the way, not in Bitcoin, but in Bitcoin mining companies for whatever strange reason.
Uh, the thing I like about sweat equity is let's say it's even like we're going to go 50-50 on this company, and that separates you from the guys who are like, oh well, gosh, I should own my entire company, it's my idea, versus guys who are like, I'm super passionate about this idea, I want it to be successful, I would do this even if I was starving,
That's right.
and
That's
so
right.
yeah.
Well, and those are the
It's
guys you want, but you want to be able to value them.
mhm.
And you can't value them on their words of their passion. You have to value them on their actual passion. And how do you measure anything? Through action. So
Yeah.
and then you need a way to remunerate them for their action, and that's sweat equity. And it works. It's a great formula actually to measure all kinds of things. It's like, how serious is this person, right? Like that's how I know when people are serious, right? When they come onto my Discord server or something, or they ping me in the comments and they're willing. Well, if you're willing to leave a comment on my videos, like that's sweat equity to me, super valuable. Even if it's a negative comment, I don't care. Like negative feedback's super important, right? That's how you learn. But like I've had people recently putting sweat equity in, which is why I was able to get. I'm working on 2 commentary streams at once, which I could never do before, only because we have another worker who's volunteering on navigating patterns for free to fix the SRT files, which is not optional in commentaries, because of all the goofy language and the difficult names. So usually I was doing that. So if I do a 2-hour commentary, that's like 6 hours of my time. Because I have to go
like
through
the transcript of the video?
the transcript file. Yeah, I have to
Yeah.
fix the transcript file myself.
Mhm.
So it like a 2-hour video is 6 hours of release time. Well, now it's 3 hours of release time. So now I can do 2 at once because it's not that much time anymore because somebody else is dealing with that for me. So I don't have to do that work. And there's a bunch of other work too. When you gotta rewatch the video and put in timestamps for all the video references you make, and there's a bunch of even if you do low editing, which we do very low editing, and I do have an editor, but I do very low editing on navigating patterns just because of the way I do my videos. It's purposely low editing, so my editor doesn't have a lot of work. And so that if he's busy, I can actually edit my own videos, although you can tell when I do it, it's not as good, right? But even with that, there's a bunch of post stuff you have to do before you upload to YouTube. It's a total pain in the teeth. And now that I'm doing more, like trying to SEO it, get the search engine and stuff, there's a bunch of stupid little things I have to do and a bunch of research, and it's a lot of work. But now I have like 60% less work, so I can do 2 commentaries at once, and I don't have to worry about it. The release schedule is like right now, my release schedule is super high. I got videos in the can, everything's flowing, things are going forward, right? And yeah, the workload's very, very low right now. I got someone working on video editing, I got somebody working on thumbnails, and I get somebody working on transcripts and some of the other ancillary work of watching the videos for me before I post them. So that's a bunch of sweat equity that's being put in, and when my channel makes $1 billion a day, which should be any day now, they're all going to get remunerated handsomely for their awesome efforts. Otherwise, it'll all be
taking a risk. They're like venture capitalists for you. They're taking a risk that this will just be volunteer labor. And it's not so bad because maybe they actually appreciate the work that the YouTube channel's doing, and doing it for free is worth it. But if they get a little something on the side for their work, nobody ever says no to that.
And you get experience, and that's the thing. Like it was famous back in the early days of Hollywood. Back even in the 50s and 60s and 70s, people would intern in Hollywood for free all the time because just bringing coffee to people and not getting any money for it was a big deal. And if you're willing to do that, you get a lot of advantages, right?
Hey, Jess.
What's up, guys?
We're just talking about money,
I know. I've been listening in the last 15 minutes as I've been putting in sweat equity here in the office.
Excellent. Right. Yeah, you know more about sweat equity than most people.
It's tiring.
True.
Yeah, but normally you're streaming on Sunday nights, and I can't really join.
It's going to be Mondays now. It's going to be
really
Mondays now. Mondays are going to work better than Sundays for me. I've been thinking about this for months, and I finally pulled the trigger on it because it's just the way the schedule, the rhythm of my life works out. The Sundays were once good, but no longer. So we're just updating things.
Well, I just wanted to come say hi to you guys.
Oh, it's good to see you. Hello. It's great to see you. How you doing, man?
I know, it's good to see you too. Doing good. Just busy with family and work and normal stuff. Nothing too crazy.
You want to talk about unpaid labor? Talk about getting kids to bed. That's unpaid labor right there.
Sweat equity. There you go. They're going to take care of you when you're old, hopefully. Otherwise, all that sweat equity will be wasted, Jess. They throw you in a home and make you pay for it. Wasted
know.
sweat equity.
Social Security will pay for me to be in a home, I guess.
Yeah.
Or
Nothing like
something.
leaving your well-being to professionals.
It's a scary future, but here we go.
No, your kids will fight over who gets to take you in. Don't worry.
Oh, I'm sure.
That I'm convinced
you-
that's why my grandmother wouldn't go live with any of her kids, because she knew they were all petty and jealous, and I think that's why she insisted on blowing all her money in a home, which she
Oh.
did until recently, until she passed. Was that last month? I can't even keep track. That was not a fun trip. I'm
Yeah,
still
too bad.
recovering from my trip up to the funeral.
When was that?
I'm trying to remember now.
I think it was last weekend.
Yeah, I think I got back last week, maybe last weekend. Yeah, it was pretty recently, actually.
Yeah, sorry to hear that.
Oh, no, 2 weekends.
2 weeks. It was 2
weekends
weekends. Yeah, it was a couple weekends. It was October for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, my grandmother was 96. Like it was time. She's been saying
run.
for years, like, it was lovely seeing you at Christmas. I'm glad I'm able to come. I hope I don't see you next year. Like, no. She'd be like nice about it, like, no offense, but like, I hope I'm not here. I'm tired. I want to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how my grandma was. Because her hearing was going, her sight was going, and she's just done.
Oh, my grandmother. The only reason why we knew she was going downhill is because she started to lose almost half her Scrabble games. And she was sharp till the end, dude. I mean, she was physically weak, but my goodness, what a mind. I mean, she was just on it the whole time.
Is the one Scrabble game you beat her and you're like, oh, this is not good.
I think I played Scrabble with my grandmother like twice, and I'm not even good at Scrabble. But like, my father's PhD in English Lit, they played, and she just freaking wiped the floor with him. It was just horrific. Blood everywhere. It was terrible. So yeah, no, I mean, she was a monster at that. She used to actually make crossword puzzles for the hospital for like charity and stuff. And like for the they used to put up this little paper, this little newsletter paper, and she'd build crossword puzzles by hand and stuff all the time.
That's cool.
Yeah. She hand cards. I've got a bunch of her cards that she just hand printed. She was doing like sewing at the nursing home and hand printing cards for people and stuff, and printing them off on her printer. And she was remarkable.
She was doing nice things for the old people at the nursing home. Huh?
Oh yeah.
Well into her 90s. Yeah, I've met the type before.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, she was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Blessed with a long life.
We gotta address some of this, Father. Sorry, I have to do this. Is it how you propose that people loan their shared work to others without getting anything in return for it? It happens all the time. Like, what do you mean? Like, it happens constantly. Some people call it charity, by the way. Right? That's how it's supposed to work. Like, you give charity in this world, and then that is somehow returned to you in the next. Sometimes some people think things like that work out. No,
pleasure in heaven.
Go to an entrepreneurship meeting. You'll see it. Like, the entrepreneurship community here in Columbia, South Carolina, they talk about it all the time. They say, give first attitude and all this. And like, I've talked to a bunch of people and just said, oh yeah, this is how software works, and this is what you want to do, and this is what you don't want to do. I mean, I don't get paid for that, and I don't expect to get paid for that ever, and that's fine. Like, people do this all the time. Like, they're constantly doing this, like constantly. And in the serial entrepreneurs, they'll be in 5 or 6 businesses that fail. I've been in way more than that, so they're wimps. But they'll be in 5. No, the successful ones will only have to do 4 or 5 before they get a hit. I'm not one of those, in case you didn't notice. I'm at like 12. I have one
You're
that
not the founder of
made a
all of
lot.
them, right? You've been working with other people on these things.
Yeah, it's always working with other people. You can't do businesses by yourself. That's obscene and absurd. Like you have to know 12 different things or 10 different things to run a business. And, like just read the 10-day MBA by Steven Silberter and it'll make you a better employee because you'll get a sense for how, I mean, businesses are complex. The larger they get, the worse it is. But even a small business, like, man, I mean, my failure was I could build tech all day long. I just couldn't sell tech. And I didn't want to. So, like, it didn't matter. Like, you know what Shopify does? I've actually had 2 conversations with 2 different people about this in the past week. I built all that in my basement. Like, we had a way better system that did all the SEO. I could get you on the first 2 pages of Google within 30 days. And we did that through customizing open source software. We were the first ones to actually put the match the URL name and the meta tag with the storefront data. So if all you had to do as the storefront owner was fill in the product list, and when you filled in the product list, we automatically fixed the URLs and put all the meta tags on all the pages for you in the software. And we made the modifications. My partner and I made the modifications that everybody else subsequently used. And this is in the early 2000s to do that. And some of that has changed now, but like we did that first, and that business totally failed. Now that business did not lose us money, but also didn't make a hell of a lot of cash. Yeah, I didn't make any money to speak of.
So the stuff that you're talking about that everybody was using was contributions to open source software.
Yeah, we made a contribution and we held back some other contribution, of course, right? Because that's how you do it now. I mean, they still do it that way. They'll contribute some stuff and hold back some stuff and make it proprietary. That's extremely common, even to this day. But yeah, we were on that early. I mean, I was an early adopter of open. I still use open source. Almost everywhere I go, they say, "What do you use for this? And what do you use for that?" And I'm like, I don't know any of these commercial products because they're all derived from open source, except for a few of them which have open source alternatives. So I just customize those because
that's another ecosystem where this people are loaning stored work all the time. Is these open source?
Right. Open source is a good
projects.
example of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy because it can be done anywhere. You don't have to actually show up. You can just write the code on your computer and see if it works, rather than like, if you want to come help me out, you got to come to Fargo, and it's like, that'd be cool. I'd be into it, but you might not be in a position to make that commitment. I get it. So.
Yeah. Open source contributions is a good way. I mean, there's lots of projects out there. I mean, people, if you've seen Castle Adams, he's doing a lot of work with his church and some church adjacent organizations for free, and not even for free. He's spending money to help organizations that he's not even part of. I don't know. He's completely insane. Wonderful person. So people do that all the time. But the whole concept of the loan system is actually, it's supposed to work more like insurance, where it's spread risk. And so when you have government bailouts, you break the system. And that's why Jubilees are important, right? Because you're supposed to share the risk and then everybody's supposed to lose. It's supposed to reset, right? That's actually how it's supposed to work. There's some great talks. They're probably 7 years old, 8 years old now, by Yaron Brook. So Yaron Brook talks about interesting things, or he used to. And one of them is the Jubilee system. And some other people talk about that too. But the other thing he talks about is the whole usury system, and how Europe got a bunch of Jewish bankers, and why that mattered. Later on we'll say why the court Jew was a thing and how all that happened. And this is all based in religion. And if you don't understand the religious basis for banking, the Templars are famously, quote, the first bankers. There's some dispute about that, but if you don't understand why that's important and how that came to be, then it can be very confusing. But what you're supposed to do is spread the risk around. And so, in the 2008 housing crisis, for example, those banks should have just lost that money because they had the money to lose. and the people who lived in houses didn't have houses to lose, right? Because that was their house. Like, if you didn't have more than one house, they shouldn't have been able to take your house. The banker should have just lost the money. There are reasons why that didn't happen.
There's a law in Florida now where your primary, if you only own one house, it like can't be taken from you. Something crazy like that. And so that's part of what's driving property prices up in Florida is all of a sudden you can get like a risk-free asset. You buy this, $100 million estate, and it's not. Yeah, so like the billionaires see it and like, oh, this is great. This is a risk-free asset right there. It can't be taken no matter what.
Right.
So it's just funny that the incentive, because you can imagine after the 2008 stuff why somebody would want to pass this home, because some bank messed things up and now you're losing your house. It's like that's manifestly unjust. But these things always come with funny little writers in them.
That wouldn't have been so bad. That would have been so bad if the banks weren't lying about what they owned. But if you want to know more about that, go to Navigating Patterns and look at my domicile video. I'm going to do another video about 2008 housing crisis. I know so much about it, but I'm doing some more research on what everybody else thinks. And I've already found some interesting things that I'm like, I didn't even notice that. That's suspicious. Yeah, and you can whine about Euron Brook being former, I don't think he's the head anymore of the objectivists, crazy Ayn Rand people or whatever. And I do like Ayn Rand, but also crazy people. But I like his work on this is actually really good. And there's a historian too, and I forget, he talked about Jubilee back then too, but 7-8 years ago, he's probably still talking about it. And I forget his name just because too many names. But yeah, Jubilee and the banking system is a fascinating history. It's all tied up with religion, of course, as all good history is. And it's super important to understand that stuff, actually, historically, especially.
Hello, Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Hello.
Thanks for checking us in to make sure that the tomorrow will happen. Because now that you're here, we know that tomorrow will in fact happen.
It is, yeah. Here in Sydney, it's 8 minutes to 2 p.m. Monday. Oh, Tuesday. God.
Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah.
There is a Tuesday.
We're just exploring the history of banking and jubilees and interest and loans and usury.
Ooh. Well,
all this stuff.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. For example, I'm talking about Catholicism or Christianity, as I understand, reading my limited knowledge of history, medieval history. Is money was always frowned upon, not the money per se, but the usurious part, and it was verboten, to use the German expression, of charging any interest. Right. It was similar to sodomy. Having sodomy, there's no production, there's no fruit. So if you have money, if you're a millionaire, and you charge any interest on it, that is the sin, because you're not contributing whatsoever in terms of value, labor, and so forth. And on that point, as a lawyer, in the common law tradition, and we've got barristers, the profession here in Australia is divided. And if you the wig and the gown, and they've got a black gown, and there's a big pocket at the back of it. If you ever look at it in old movies, I'll tell you the story about that. It was frowned upon for a gentleman, a barrister, a lawyer, to touch money in public. So the client used to slip the money, the coins, into the huge pocket in the back. So it was dirty. It's like going to the toilet, not washing your hands or something like that. You would never see a gentleman to.
And that's really funny because most cash is actually very dirty. Carries bacteria like nothing else. So
right. But we were talking about that, Jim, in terms of Euron Brook used to talk about this quite a bit. Like that's where you got the court Jew. He was the moneylender for the king in Europe for that reason, because the Christians basically were running Europe and they weren't allowed to loan each other money at interest. And so to get large amounts of money with lots of risk to persecute a war, for example, they would go to the court Jew. And that's also why they used to get rid of them on a regular. There's lots of reasons why the Jews are really not looked well upon in European countries, even to this day, unfortunately for them. And that there's all these little things. There's a bunch of little things that you don't realize. One of them is they were the court Jews. So it was always fortuitous for them to be got rid of at convenient times when the king owed them money, much like they did with the Templars, by the way, which is why we have Friday the 13th, right? The King Philip, the later King Philip, because it was King Philip the First, I think, that loaned all the that got loaned all the money. King Philip the Third or Second or whatever it was, he's the one that got rid of them all because now I owe them money, and he conspired, unfortunately, with Rome. But they pretty much got rid of most of them.
Yeah. No, that's what can I say? The love of money is the root of all evil. Somebody should write that down.
The position of the Jews, or Ashkenazi and various other Spanish Jews, not Eastern European, they were the sort of middlemen, but they were always handling money for the benefit of the king or the local baron. So they were the tax collectors, so to speak, to use the biblical terms, more or less. And that's what they were frowned upon. I mean, it's and everybody detested them, as we all know. The 2,000 years of Christianity is talking about. I always make a analogy, comparing on an African savanna, lions and hyenas. They coexist, but they hate each other. And you see hyenas gang up on a lion and kill a lion. On the other occasion, you see the lion ganging up on the hyenas. So, but they coexist in sort of pros and cons. But that is the history, I suppose, and of them being not liked, put it that way. And there is a good reason. And there's, as you all know, 109 times they were banished. I'm talking about 1215 from King John banished them. You mentioned Ferdinand banished them. Portugal, city-states. They weren't countries. Germany, there's many Germanies, as you know. Europe wasn't, a continent as we know it in contemporary modern history. But they were banished 109 times. And I always say, I've got a few Jewish, friends. They're all in medicine and law, of course, like in America. And I talked to some of them and I said, look, you got banished for the last 2,000 years 109 times. Can I put a question? If I went to, I don't know, California or any bar in America and I got kicked out of the bar because I was drunk, and then I went to another bar and I got kicked out, and I went to another bar, I got kicked out. Well, would I blame the bartender or the bar owner? Could there be something wrong with me being unsavory, drunken, rowdy type? So this is thinking outside the box. But again, if you make that sort of analogy, you are bound to be detested in the contemporary censorial system we got today in America, in the Western world. There are certain phrases or thoughts which you cannot entertain publicly. I better shut up while I'm ahead.
Yeah. It's it can be a little hard to parse these things out, because maybe this is just possibilities here. I haven't done the study of the history here, but maybe it's like there was the one money guy who was really behaving detestably, and then I don't know, 200 or 300 families that were just working some sensible trade, and the one money guy gets all of them kicked out because of that kind of business there. So there's multiple ways this could have worked out. Might have just been a few at the top that managed to ruin everything else. I still sometimes on the internet will be accused of misbehavior with teenage boys because of what other priests did, and the priest did was wrong, and all wrong. It's all horrible, but sometimes the associations aren't all that tightly. The innocent get swept away with the guilty. That can happen.
Well,
That's what I'm trying to say.
That's a typical authoritarian way of thinking. I mean, Marxism is based on that. In Korea or in former Soviet Union, if you're a pilot and you escaped to the West at the height of the Cold War, your whole family was put in prison, and some of the I'm talking your wife, your kids, etc., etc. Well, similar things happening in Korea. So most of the Korean diplomats and so forth, the government makes sure that they have extended family as ransom. So when they go to America or Australia or any part of Europe, think of your mum, dad, and your kids. And if you try to do naughty things, well, you can have a go. Some do it, but it's a huge risk. So it's blackmail, basically. But it's happening all the time.
I've been steeped in Girard because I've been reading one of his books, and that's the whole scapegoating thing. And like when you're talking about the Jews that were the debt owners, and then there were the Jews that were living in the slums. Like once the scapegoating started, it was both stories. It was the wealthy, powerful Jew that's taking advantage of you, and the slimy, low-life, scum of the earth Jews. Like it was both at the same time because they had to get rid of them all, and so that whole the narrative doesn't even make sense on a certain level because like you said, you're getting rid of the rich and the poor at the same time just because of they're Jewish. But I mean, I would like to get your thoughts on Girard if you guys are familiar with him at all.
Did you watch
Mark pointed
thing?
out, Mark, I think the most useful point about your Girard video was the fact that you pointed out that Girard only gives you one way to deal with mimetic desire, right? He's got like the one thing that happened. When you see somebody else that has something you want, obviously what you're going to do is go murder that person and take it. Which is like, well, that does happen. We're not going to sit here and say that doesn't happen. That's certainly something that can happen, but sometimes you can see somebody that has something you want, and you may decide you want to imitate him. You can go and look at all of Elon Musk's billions. You can try and figure out how he did it, and try and do the same thing, rather than trying to steal it from him. Or maybe you just want to go cooperate with this person who's got this good thing, and you're like, oh, I just want to be a part of it. I don't need to have it for myself. So that was the insight that I found most salient from your Girard video. It's like, okay, he's got some insights, but he only gives you like one story when there could be lots of different ways to handle this.
He doesn't account for time either. Like, what if the guy you're mimicking is dead? Now there's no rivalry. Like, there's no rivalry that leads to the sorts of things he's talking about because it can't. And what if you realize, as many top competitors do, that your top rival is you need that guy because it makes you better. And you both know that, because that happens all the time. Like, these are much more common outcomes than the outcome that he has. Jess, I talked with on Navigating Patterns, I talked with Justin Wells about Girard. And actually,
you did.
Yeah. No, you'd
like
it. Yeah, no, you got to check that out. Also, I know Corey actually asked me for my notes at one point. I have a bunch of notes, just a couple pages. They're a little sparse. They're not like detailed notes. But if you shoot me a Gmail address at some point, I'll certainly give you access to those, and you can just read through it real quick and sort of figure out, because I've actually got it divided out into like what Girard says it's actually right, and what Girard says that's sort of, maybe not so right or whatever. And I've got like good points, bad points, and then here's all the stuff that he's just plain out wrong about. So yeah, I'm happy to share that with you in particular, of course.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
The book I'm reading is, of course, Girard's book on Job, and no one knows that he wrote a book because it's like like it's so like Nate just emailed me. He's like, you probably want to get this book. I was like, all right. But it's like like this tiny little book, and it was like $50 because used, because there's no it's not that widely distributed. But anyway, he uses all of his theories. This is after he wrote the majority of his like sort of foundational books, Girard books, when we think of him.
Yeah. And
so he's applying his theory to the interpretation of the story of Job. And it's really interesting, but Girard frustrates me to no end because the thing that frustrates me the most is he gets to the end and he's basically got the God of the persecutors and the God of the victims. And he's like, it's obviously that the God of the victims is right.
Yeah.
And he makes strong case for it. I mean, I'm basically in agreement with him, but then I'm just like, then what?
Right.
And like, there's he doesn't make any effort to reconcile anything, to integrate anything, all you are is left with the dualism. And it's even worse because when he interprets Job, God's speech at the end, which is mostly about nature, he says basically that speech is the God of the persecutors speaking, but he's retreating back into nature in order to hide himself, and it's such.
Girard's
I have so many problems with this.
Right, but Girard's a Gnostic. Like, he's clearly a Gnostic.
Yeah. And so the God of nature is some sort of demiurge.
Right.
For Girard.
No, he's explicitly a Gnostic. Like, I
figured that out, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I heard him speak, like, in his own words. I'm like, well, this is as Gnostic as Gnosticism can possibly be. And he did an interview with David Cayley, and I actually love David Cayley. And I was like, this is a horrible interview. I mean, it's a good interview. David Cayley's a great interview. There's no bad David Cayley interviews in some sense, but also, like, Girard is such a manipulative, sneaky little Gnostic bastard. Like, I mean, he links mimetic desire and
leave his mother out of this. Leave his mother out of this.
But like, needlessly links things together. Like, sacrifice and mimetic desire don't have to be linked in any way, shape, or form. I would argue they're not linked in any way, shape, or form. But
yeah,
Girard
it can be when that certain circumstances come about, and then things. Yeah, maybe. But yeah,
to him, they're one and the same. But like, he flat out says that what does he say? He says the Holy Spirit is the accuser of the accuser. And I'm like, wait a minute, you just said flat out that the Holy Spirit and Satan are the same thing. No, they're not.
The accuser of the accuser.
Right. No, that's what he said in his own words. And I was just like, you are a sneaky little son of a bitch.
It's interesting because Girard sees the problem in it, and he even points it out in this book that I read. So he'll say that how does the God of victims then act in the world without scapegoating the persecutors? And he's like, well, this is exemplified in Christ. He sort of hand waves it away, but he also just sort of says there's a huge problem here. And the other thing that he admits in this book that he doesn't like go into any depth about is he basically he gets through the book of Job, and then he goes into Christ and talks about Christ as the the embodiment of the God of victims, or the incarnation. And then he says that I just gotta say one more thing before that. So in the book of Job, Eliphaz talks about the path that the wicked take. So Eliphaz says to Job, you're on the path that the wicked takes. We see this clearly. You're on your way to destruction. Turn around, repent before it's too late. And Girard sees this as the path of the wicked is the pathway to the sacred violence of the persecute. What was it? The scapegoat mechanism has been activated, and now this path has been set for Job, and he needs to repent before it's too late. Okay, so there's the path of the wicked. Then Girard says at the end of the book that Christ takes the path of the righteous, and they're the same path.
Right.
So
He does that
instead
all
of
the
saying
time.
that this is the path of the righteous, he just says it's the path of the wicked, and that Christ just happens to take the same path and just a different outcome.
Right.
And because the scapegoat mechanism is now, I don't know. I don't know if that made any sense, but
No,
that
he's
book,
a
man,
Gnostic. Yeah.
I need to talk to someone back. It's frustrating.
No, he's pushing the Gnostic conspiracy. Anytime you want to talk to Girard, we can do it on my channel, my friend. Or we can do it on
I'm
your
supposed to
channel.
talk to Nate about. He actually got the book too. He's going to read it, and then we're going to chat on Grail Country at some point. But he's actually a fan of Girard. He likes Girard, and I haven't talked to him in depth.
That doesn't surprise me one little bit. But also, Girard is a Gnostic.
Well, I mean, when Nate says he's a fan, like he could mean that he likes some things and not others. So, because Nate's not a Gnostic, so
I sure hope not.
So.
Father Eric's like,
Well, just no, really, it's better for people to be better. Yeah.
No, Is there anyone in this little corner that's a Gnostic that's just like flat out unapologetic?
No, they all lie. Gnostics typically lie about their Gnosticism. But watch my talk with Justin Wells, because we go quite into it. I mean, Justin gave me some great, like he gave me this David Cayley interview with Girard, where it's Girard talking about himself. Like it's, there's no room for misinterpretation here. I don't even need to read it. And David Cayley's an excellent interviewer. I've always loved the guy. And clear as day. And I'm sitting there taking notes. I'm just utterly fascinated and horrified of what I'm hearing. But give me a Gmail address or whatever, Jess. Okay. I'll shoot you the summary, because that might help you. And then if you need the links, I think they're in that document. But whatever, I'll give you the links to the David Cayley talks, because I was just blown away. And then I have to read a book, because I still want to burn all the books. So
you know what? The Jung makes the same move with the speech of God at the end of Job in his book on Job. He says that the God at the end, the God of nature, is unconscious, and that Job's role, because here's the thing, they both come to it with their own framework. Girard comes to it with his framework. He ends up saying that the God of nature is basically the God of the persecutors, just once removed. He's hiding. Then Jung comes to the book of Job with his framework, and he says the God of nature is unconscious, and that Job is bringing him to consciousness.
This is why I will never read Carl Jung. He goes off the rails somewhere, and I cannot figure out where. So I'm like, best not to touch that. Best not to. If you can't figure out where they went nuts, you certainly don't want to read their stuff, because you might get fooled. So I'm very
St.
cautious.
Gregory the Great says that Job is a type of Christ. So
that's right.
There you go. Hey,
yeah,
Bruce.
That's correct. Hey,
what's up, Bruce?
When you have Job, and you're talking about Jung or Girard, but we'll just say Jung in this case. When your hermeneutic lens is symbolic and allegorical across the board, you have no choice but to end up in that position with regards to Scripture.
Oh, it doesn't have any like real grounding in creation. It's all just
it's relativism
floating around our head.
Right.
It's like it's taking the allegory, or what I think. Well, in Reformed Protestant world, they would call it types or typology. Maybe in Catholicism, they say something similar. But essentially, you take the type, or in this case, the allegory, and explode it out. And that becomes the lens by which you read all of Scripture and then all of creation. Well, right. So that's like the worst form of eisegesis, by pouring meaning into the text or pouring meaning into creation.
Right.
And so that's what you end up with. This is where Peterson is, and this is where Jung is, and this is where so many of the symbolics are. And this is what happens with like relativistic Christianity. You see this in I would say you see it in like the New Age Christianity, some versions of Orthodoxy, some versions of charismatic Catholicism, and versions of New Age Protestantism. Is a sort of reading into the text, their allegorical symbolism that they relativize to meet what their aim is.
Yeah. Yeah, Bruce, you and Jess should talk about the Book of Job. That I would watch that forever. I would watch it a million times.
Come on my
I
channel,
bet that
bro.
would be the best
Well,
conversation.
if we
of
do
all
it, Jess,
time.
we're gonna have to do like at least 100 episodes because
He's already done that.
I did that with Sherry.
Yeah.
it's gonna take a lot, right?
We did 20,
Yeah, it might be. I could be down for that.
22 hours.
Yeah, but you should
Well,
should just do that. Do the influence, of these other sort of I would call them Protestant Gnostic cults, not Reformed. They're pretty upstanding guys, Bruce. But the Protestant Gnostic cults and not the
People who don't
Anglo-Orthodox
have-
interpretation.
Who
Yeah.
don't have a rule of faith to fall back on. Is that what
Correct.
gives you
Right.
the biggest trouble? Like you
Right.
don't have something
Yep.
bigger than yourself to contain your
Yeah,
biblical reading, because
right.
You're going up
You know-
to the book, right, and interpreting what's above it effectively, right, rather than using the book as something that emanates down upon you and puts constraints upon your interpretation of the world that you live in, which is very much a problem that you see. It won't come out until part 2 of my Peterson Dawkins commentary, but you see that in the Peterson Dawkins commentary quite clearly, and I get to just explode it right then and there. I mean, they say it. It's freaking
Yeah.
hysterical what Peterson says, and I'm like, bro, you can't do that. Like, this is
What did-
completely
what did he say?
invalid.
You
But
have to watch
Peterson
the
basically,
episode.
Peterson says, I don't care if you look at it bottom up or top down. And I'm like, no, that actually matters a lot. I just stopped the video
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, this matters. It matters
Yeah.
a lot if you look at it bottom up versus top down. And by the way, one of them's right and the other one's wrong. And yeah, I go nuts on that.
You get a lot of that in the academics, like, and you know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's fruitful or not, but they basically come to the text. And I was just reading something about a section in Job. It was actually a really, really fascinating paper, but in the conclusion, one of their conclusions says that this probably got misplaced and it was supposed to be over here, and this part was supposed to be over here, and they would be more consistent throughout. And you're like, what?
Who are you, and why do you want to be the editor of the Bible? The
I
position
know.
is
Consistent to
filled.
whom, and why does it need to be more consistent? Like they're like,
Yeah,
"So-and-so
you're missing the
said
point.
that." You're like,
You're
but they
missing
did.
the
So
point.
try to make sense of why they said it, not that had to be
Well-
someone else that said it.
Well, all the magic in that silly book, from what I understand, since I haven't read it, is
You
the
should read it.
inconsistency, because that's what points to the symbolism, which is what gives you the poetic way of informing the world, so that you know good from evil, because you can't do it any other way. You can't say, well, this person shot this person and therefore they're guilty of murder. We don't even do that in the legal system. Like, why would you think you could do that in a higher moral system that's above the legal system? And people make that mistake constantly, or they well, obviously somebody made money, so they must have taken it from the poor. It's like, that isn't how any of that works, like, ever.
If I can say a couple of words,
Yeah.
it all boils down to etymology. And thank God I'm a Catholic, and I'm again, no bad dispersions to those who are agnostic or Protestant. One of the reasons, the beauty of Catholicism, is its magisterium, 2,000 years magisterium. The second thing, it's 2,000 years culture. But the most important thing is it's hierarchical. And the pinnacle of that pyramid or hierarchy, it's the Pope. And I'm not a theologian by any stretch of imagination, but you are mentioning why I said, thank God I'm a Catholic. I'll tell you why. As I speak, you in Canada, in America, have about 35,000 splinter religions. Every corner's got a Anabaptist, Baptist, Methodist, blah, blah, blah church. And this is the very
Bible
point you were
churches
talking about.
are the most
And
common.
you were talking about, when you got that Bible thing, you read the book, and you got your 250 or a couple of hundred people in your church. They provide you with sort of an income, more or less, unless you're one of those huge evangelicals. But I digress. Now, getting back to the thing in law, because this is what I'm talking about. And there's a old case in criminal law. It happened in 1949, just after the war in London. There were two robbers. Basically, the story is there was one gun, and there was an old dilapidated factory, and they got caught on the roof of the factory. It was after midnight, and the coppers or the bobbies surrounded, and they climbed through the stairs. They couldn't escape. So there were all these chimneys on the roof, and one of the defendant had a gun, and the other one didn't. So the other guy said, "Bobby, let him have it," and he shot and he killed the copper. So they were both up jointly and severally for murder. So the defense of one of the people was, well, I said, "Bobby, let him have it." I didn't mean Bobby, bang, bang, have it. Bobby, let him have the gun. Thus, I revert back. Thus, I revert back to the Bible or any of the so-called modern philosophers or theologians. And the beauty is that our doctrine, in any dispute, theological, etymological, is goes up the hierarchy: bishops, priests, people. And how do you interpret the Bible? Bible, as I understand, is second was Greek and vernacular. What's happening? A
Kind of
glitch.
froze up for a second.
A glitch.
Yeah, but anyway, what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say, basically, very simply, it is the problem of any text, any newspaper, any book, is we can read it in various styles and attribute various meanings. We are very critical of Middle Ages and their mindset. Because we are looking from a perspective of our so-called advanced 21st century modern world. So a mark of a good historian, any type of historian, ancient or medieval or modern, is to put your mind in the mindset of the people at the time. It is very hard. But anyway, I talk too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there is, you're over in Australia where you don't have the 35,000 splinter groups there, but there is a little bit of variety.
Oh, close to it. I'm close to it.
and different qualities of the different churches. Some of them are a little more structured and have a better, we could call it a rule of faith or a better tradition that helps them handle those things.
But what do they preach, Father? Father, what do every preacher, Protestant preacher, preach? All you need is the Bible. You don't need any intercession.
Yeah.
And you interpret that text according to what I interpret those words, those passages. Old Testament, New Testament, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's why you have the splinter. That Joe down there, that Pastor Joe down the road, he's wrong. He can't read his Bible. So what Protestants are saying, and I think it's really bad, you have your hot phone direct like Trump will have to Kremlin. Hello, Putin. You have your hot phone right to God. You don't need the hierarchy, the history, bugger all that. Just get the Bible and she'll be right, mate. And I say that.
If I could just give you a little perspective here is that can't possibly keep a church going, right? Like that, what you just described there, and we could all, probably everybody here, including the three, would acknowledge that that can't possibly work. And so my part of the reason why I continue to be Catholic and I love my Catholicism is that we're just very honest about the functioning of our scripture, tradition, and magisterium, and we point at these things and say it's authoritative and it has to be authoritative. That's the only way to keep the church working, is that this can have authority binding on it. So we can imagine somebody at a particular, let's say, Baptist church, right? And the practice of this Baptist church is to not baptize infants, right? That's a very common Baptist sort of thing right there. And there's somebody, let's say, who's grown up in this church, right? They were, they got dunked when they were 15. And they decide that they're going to go get married. They find a nice young lady. They have some children. And he's been studying his Bible pretty closely. And he starts looking at some of those texts in the Acts of the Apostles that seem to imply that there was an entire household that was baptized. And that would have included infants there. It starts going into these historical arguments. comes to a conclusion that he thinks infant baptism should be practiced. And, you know, when he goes to his pastor to talk about these things, the pastor is going to say, well, no, we're not going to do that. You could, maybe even the pastor would be like, you could do this with your child at home, and like we won't cause any fuss over that and allow you to continue to be a party, but we're not going to do that here because we have a tradition of understanding the Bible this way as a community. And as your pastor, I've been placed in a part of authority by the board of elders here to do that tradition. So it ends up functioning authoritatively anyway. That's the way it actually functions in the that's just Father Eric from the outside looking inside there saying, you've got scripture and tradition, or you've got the tradition and the magisterium as well. And it, when push comes to shove, it functions authoritatively, but you're telling me that it's not authoritative. And that's where the kind of the disjunction comes in. So that's maybe a somewhat more winsome way of pointing out what our friend Jim here has pointed out.
But
that's just what I think.
The Gnostic heresies should not be tolerated. I mean, believing that you as a person can understand a book such as the Bible that has a distributed cognition through time that is so difficult that even Jess, who I can attest is quite intelligent, needs to do 100 episodes with other people and still can't understand Job, which I still argue is a very simple book in some sense. It should be a testament to the fact that, like, you can't do that. That's just one book. And Jess still doesn't think he understands it, although he probably understands it better than most people do.
I could just talk about it for a long time.
Yeah, well, and there's so much more. Like, that's just one book, man. There's a lot more to the Bible. Like, why do you think that like, well, you need help with that? And if that help hasn't been stable and consistent through time, then is it helpful? Like, and is it helping you in the right direction, or are you just part of another Gnostic heresy through time? I don't know.
I would just state that there are two things I think with regards to that. Number one, I would agree, scripture is to be read and understood in the context of the church. So I think that's correct. And then number two is the laborious effort in understanding, reading, and coming to the knowledge of knowing God better, which is what we're commanded to do in Deuteronomy 4 and 6, rather. Deuteronomy 6, 4-9, to know and love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so that like laborious effort of understanding the scriptures, laboring in them in the context of the church is the most fruitful part of the laborious work of the Christian. So I think in both of those efforts, you can't go wrong. That's how I would go with that. Yeah.
And to put another thing on it, part of what the scripture is supposed to do to you is transform you. And in order to do that, it has to resonate in you somehow. Like it has to make sense on some sort of very, very deep level. And the only way that can happen, that can't be given to you through a hierarchy. That has to be given to you by some sort of miracle. But it's also like something like Matthew Pageau talks about with rumination. Like that process will you can corrupt that process. And so that's why you need to stay as pure as possible, so that when you do resonate, you're resonating properly. But like those things have to be made real to you, and you have to have a real relationship with God, and not just a relationship, with I can't just have a relationship with my pastor. But but all that to be said, like also read the Bible in context of your church, there's traditions, the authority, everything that Father Eric said, I wouldn't disagree with.
Yeah, everyone has traditions, and someone who says they don't have traditions probably has the most traditions, is what I would say.
Yep.
Right.
The people who say they're not religious are the most religious.
Usually.
I'm about to wrap this up because it's dark outside and it's time for rational creatures to go to bed. However,
Aha.
hi Valerie.
Hi,
We've been-
everybody.
We've been going at it pretty good here and letting a few fists fly. But do you have any parting thoughts for us?
I've been learning last couple days about a thing called intellectual hospitality. The word and concept have been around since 1880 something, and it's basically what you guys are all doing is listening to each other, but it's more than just tolerance. It's much more robust than that. It's being true to your own convictions and your own beliefs and everything, and still having an open ear to hear from other people from different beliefs. And you guys were doing that wonderfully.
Well, that's what we're trying to do here. Fruitful exchange between the various contenders in the Peterson sphere. So I'm glad that it has met your approval, Valerie. And thanks for hopping on. Thanks for all of you for hopping on and your unique contributions to this conversation. So happy Monday, good night, and God bless you all.
God bless.
Thank you.
Bye.
God bless. God bless.